Have you ever wished you could just decode the people around you? Today, we're diving into Patrick King's Read People Like a Book to pull out some of the key secrets of human behavior, and we're going to break it all down right here. I mean, we've all been there, right? You're in a conversation, maybe it's a super important meeting, and you're just sitting there desperately trying to figure out what the other person is actually thinking. What's really going on behind that poker face? Now, the book argues that while actual mind reading is, fiction, the ability to understand people is a very real skill you can build. It's not magic. It's about learning to decode that constant stream of signals people are always sending out, a lot of the time without even saying a word. So the book kicks things off with this fundamental challenge it calls the black box problem. And when you think about it, it makes perfect sense. Every person you interact with is essentially a mystery. You can't just plug into their brain and see their thoughts and feelings. The book uses this powerful metaphor. Someone else's mind is a sealed black box. You can't see the inner workings at all. All you have to go on are the outputs, their words, their actions, their body language. So our job then is to become expert interpreters of that data. But before we can become good interpreters, we gotta face a hard truth. We're probably getting it wrong a lot. Most of us walk around totally convinced we're great judges of character, but the book argues our own minds are actually playing tricks on us. And it's all because of something called confirmation bias. See, our brains are basically wired to notice and remember all the times our gut feeling was right, while we conveniently forget all the times we were completely off base. This creates this really dangerous illusion that we're experts when we're not. The book breaks this down into 3 huge mistakes we make all the time. First, we ignore the context. Is that person fidgeting because they're lying or just because it's their first ever job interview? Big difference. Second, we forget their baseline. Is your coworker really angry or are they just kind of naturally quiet? And third, we project. We just assume other people would feel the exact same way we would in that situation, and that totally clouds our judgment. This quote just nails the whole context problem, doesn't it? I mean, think about your own day. Maybe you snapped at someone because you were running late and skipped breakfast. Does that one single moment define who you are? Of course not. And that's exactly why we have to look for consistent patterns, not just isolated incidents. Okay, so if we're supposed to be looking for patterns, what are we even looking for? Well, the book argues that to really understand behavior, you have to decode the why behind the action. You got to get to those deep, underlying motivations. And right at the very heart of all human motivation, the book says there's one core driver, the pleasure principle. It's this primal 2-part command that's basically hardwired into our brains. Seek pleasure and avoid pain. Simple as that. This simple push and pull drives almost every single thing we do. We get a haircut to feel more attractive. That's moving toward pleasure. We swerve to avoid an accident. That's moving away from pain. Every choice we make is part of this fundamental calculation. But here's the crucial twist. These 2 forces are not equal. The book argues that the motivation to avoid pain is a far more powerful driver than the pursuit of pleasure. The fear of losing something will almost always trump the hope of gaining something. And this isn't just about physical pleasure and pain. Nope. There's this incredibly powerful psychological layer to all of this, our relentless, deep-seated drive to protect our own self-image, our ego. The book gives us this brilliant visual. It says to think of the ego as a heavily armored giant porcupine. I love that. It's prickly, it's defensive, and its first instinct is to fire its quills at anything that makes it feel threatened or ashamed or wrong. People will go to incredible lengths to protect. So how does this ego porcupine defend itself? Well, one of its primary weapons is something called rationalization. It's really just a fancy word for the art of making excuses. The mental gymnastics we do to reframe a failure so it doesn't sting our pride. This is captured perfectly in that old fable about the sour grapes. The fox fails to get the grapes, so instead of admitting failure, which would hurt his ego, he rationalizes. He just changes reality and decides he never wanted them in the first place. We do this all the time. You get rejected for a job and say, I probably would have hated it there anyway. Okay, so we've got the theory down. How do we turn all these insights into a practical, real-world toolkit that we can actually use to understand people better? Well, here it is. This is your new observation toolkit. Remember, look for patterns, not just single events. Always consider the context. And establish a person's baseline before you make a judgment. Then you can ask the big questions. What pleasure are they seeking? What pain are they trying to avoid? And hey, is that little ego porcupine making an appearance? And the foundation for all of it? You have to start by knowing your own biases first. And that's really the heart of the whole thing. This isn't about becoming a human lie detector or some kind of psychic overnight. The goal is simply to gather better data, use a more reliable framework, and ultimately just make more thoughtful and empathetic guesses about what's going on inside that black box. So as we wrap this up, I'll leave you with a question. Armed with this new toolkit, who is the first person in your life you're going to try to understand just a little bit better?